Hey everyone, I'm Greg Plotkin from American Farmland Trust, your host of this very special live free-range conversation. Today we're talking Farmland Protection 101, tips, advice, and guidance for saving the land that sustains us. I'm really happy today to have Jerry Cosgrove, AFT's Farm Legacy Director, who is an expert in all of the issues that we'll be talking about today. Jerry, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So just a reminder to everyone, this is a live conversation. We're doing these so we can engage with you, our supporters, and get your questions answered. And so at any time throughout the call, if you have a question, just chat it into the whatever social media platform you're viewing this on. We'll see it and we'll do our best to answer it on the call. Jerry's been involved in these issues for a long time, involved with AFT for a long time. So I wanted to kick this off just asking him to give us the really, really brief snippet, because I know it's extensive, just how you got involved in these issues and then why you're still working on them.
Sure. Well, I come by it naturally. I'm part of a fourth generation farm in central New York. Grew up there. I actually farmed in partnership for a while after graduating, then went on to law school after that and practiced law for a few years. But really, there was a missing piece for me, and I wanted to get back involved with agriculture somehow, and volunteered for a local land trust. That led to a job at AFT many years ago as a New York director, and worked in the Northeast for many years. Took a stint in public service as a deputy commissioner working on farmland protection, among other issues, and did some consulting work with another nonprofit in the Hudson Valley, creating a demonstration and organic farm in the Hudson Valley. And then have returned to AFT now as Farm Legacy Director, really working on a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Farmland transfer, helping folks think through about, how to protect their land, how to transfer it to the next generation. And, really pleased to be able to be back at working at AFT, working with landowners, our members, our other staff, our partners and stakeholders. So I currently I also work as of counsel for a statewide agricultural law firm, but take my role seriously here as Farm Legacy Director and a senior advisor to our president, John Piatti.
And so at American Farmland Trust, we talk a lot about farmland protection. We talk a lot about saving the land that sustains us. And one of the things that I want to talk to you about today is what do we mean when we talk about farmland protection? What are the mechanisms? What are the programs that we can use in America to protect farmland from development?
Yeah, one of the things that drew me to AFT, many years ago, was the fact that it approached these issues very holistically. Really, boil down and into the expression of land practices and people. All are important. And to me, the farmland protection, broadly defined, really includes all of those components. You need to protect the land base. And there are lots of ways to do that. I'll come back to that. You need to farm the land sustainably so it can remain productive into the future. And we have to support the people that farm the land, because as a colleague observed a long time ago, it's not farmland without farmers or ranchers. It's a function of human effort, a lot of work that goes into it. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really thrilled to be able to work on farm transfer issues, because I feel that's an important farmland protection tool, getting the land to the next generation, whether it's within the family, to someone outside the family, to a new farmer who's having trouble accessing land. I'm so pleased that AFT is working on all of those fronts. And in terms of farmland protection itself, there's conservation easements, there's ag districts, there's use value property taxation, property tax credits, and really looking at ways to help farmers stay viable, because again, they need to be profitable to be able to stay on the land. And again, I think I felt strongly way back when, and still do now, that AFT is the only national organization that works on all of these issues, links them together, and really takes, the big picture of what it takes to keep land and agriculture for the future.
So why don't we break that up? Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of these programs individually? So in terms of a conservation easement, how would that work for someone that owns farmland and is interested in protecting it for future generations?
Sure. So a conservation easement is, in its simplest terms, a deed restriction, generally a permanent deed restriction, that restricts future uses of the land. Primarily, it prohibits or severely limits residential and commercial development. as well as subdivision into smaller parcels. And again, fragmentation of land, conversion of land is a serious threat to AFT. And our recent Farms Under Threat study demonstrates that it's still a threat. We see more and more land being converted to other uses. The easement, again, it's a voluntary deed restriction that the landowner drives the process. They can voluntarily donate a conservation easement to nonprofit organizations like American Farmland Trust or their local land trust. And many states and localities have purchase programs where you can actually get compensated for the reduction in value, which is significant in most cases, for permanently restricting future uses of the land. A very important tool. One of the things that I've always really been proud of at AFT is we focus very strongly on the landowner choice. It is the landowners who drive conservation easements, and really it's their conservation ethic that's at the heart of conservation easements, farmland protection, and frankly, AFT's mission.
And just to remind everyone, this is a live conversation. We'd love to take your questions. If you have any questions about protecting farmland, tools available, please just ask those questions in the comment thread of the social platform that you're viewing it on, and we'll do our best to answer it on the call. So conservation easements, they're really about keeping land in agriculture, right? Making sure that a part of land isn't sold to a developer, but houses or soccer fields or anything like that. But it doesn't strip any property owners of their land ownership rights. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, an agricultural conservation easement, which is what AFT focuses on, given our mission, really prevents uses that would be incompatible with agricultural use, but allows a wide range of uses that are compatible, such as transferring the property, leasing it out if you're not farming it, hunting, fishing. Those are all rights that the landowner retains. And importantly, one of the rights that the landowner retains with conservation easements is the right to control access to their property, so that if they want to allow access for recreational uses, hunting or fishing or any other kind of use, it's their prerogative. The easement does not require any kind of public access, and that's an important issue. And the other thing I would say is that local governments can be rest assured that the property is going to stay on the tax rolls. Again, taxed at agricultural value, but still on the tax rolls, and paying taxes, paying for the local services, and not being taken off the tax rolls and reducing the local tax base, which is a legitimate concern in many communities, but one that really isn't relevant with respect to conservation easements.
So if you're a landowner or even a town or maybe a nonprofit organization that's interested in these issues of protecting farmland in their community, well, what's a good way to get started, whether that is with AFT or another organization?
Yeah, the place I would suggest people start is the AFT Farmland Information Center. It is a wealth of knowledge, broad range, categorized by topic, state, so folks who are interested can really dig in and learn more. Frankly, we have staff that staff the Farmland Information Center, very knowledgeable, can help guide folks to where to look, what to think about. And obviously, AFT has regional staff across the country that are, in position to help local communities or state governments or private entities think about how they can get into, helping to protect farmland. And there's lots of ways to do that. Direct land protection, policy, simply supporting farmers in the farming community is a great way to enhance farmland protection for the long term.
So we've been doing this land protection work for a long time at AFT. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about a success story, some way that we've been able to help a landowner protect their land.
Well, the simplest, there's really two main sort of categories of landowners. One is there are landowners who simply want to see their land and know that it's protected permanently. And obviously, AFT has done many, many projects helping landowners place conservation easements on their property so that those landowners are assured that that land will stay available for agriculture, can't be subdivided, can't be converted to non-agricultural use, and can do that over time. In many states, particularly in the Northeast and other areas of the country, there are purchase programs, and those programs help farmers and ranchers protect their land permanently, but also provide some compensation. And quite often that compensation is used for a variety of purposes, improving the the economic viability of the business, reducing debt, in many cases can and does help facilitate transfer to the next generation. And that's probably the area that I find, given my background and focus on farm transfer issues, that I think is a very important linkage between farmland protection. Again, families that want to convey the land to the next generation, easements are a great tool to help facilitate that, as well as, create permanent protection. So I think, I can think of dozens of situations where landowners have the peace of mind of protecting their land, but also many, many situations where landowners have used a conservation easement, whether a donated easement or a purchased easement, one where they receive compensation, to facilitate the transfer to the next generation. And again, I think it's a great combination, as my colleague Julia Freegood has often said, that farmland protection and farm transfer go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely, because the idea is not to protect farmland so it can sit there and just be open space, right? The idea of protecting farmland is to make that land available for the next generation to be able to work it.
Obviously, I mean, and again, it's not called a working landscape,
right?
Again, farms and ranches, they require a lot of effort and human care and stewardship, and it's one of the things that makes them such a valuable and challenging resource to protect, because it's not just about protecting the land and leaving it be. It needs to be nurtured and stewarded, by a farmer or rancher over the next generation.
And for new beginning farmers, people that are getting into agriculture, we know one of the biggest barriers is the price of farmland, right? The kind of price of admission to get into agriculture. Do you think that conservation easements help make land more affordable for someone who wants to pursue a career in agriculture that maybe doesn't come from a farm family?
Absolutely. I think it's another, in addition to farm transfer, I think the affordability issue is a really critical and perhaps underappreciated aspect of farmland protection. Again, these deed restrictions reduce the value of the property. There's a market value with no restrictions where, again, the potential end use could be anything, including development, which in the short term has a much higher value on the market than agricultural use. So that difference is significant. And depending on how close you are to an urban center where there's development pressure or second home demand, that can be substantial, well over half the base value of the property. And so that value is either given away if it's a donated easement, or purchased, compensated if there's a purchase program. But the residual value is much, much more affordable for a newer beginning farmer. And I think it's critical that we think about land access and the link between land access and farmland protection, because I think they're a very strong linkage. And it is, again, one more very, very good reason to think about protecting land with a conservation easement.
Just reminding everyone, we'd love to answer any questions you have about farmland protection, conservation easements, all of these tools we have to save the land that sustains us. If you've got any questions, please just type them in to the comment thread of the social platform you're viewing this on, and we'll do our best to get to them. So Jerry, you addressed kind of on the front end, making land more affordable for the next generation of farmers. But I feel like the compensation part for landowners is very important too, because a lot of farmers don't have a 401k program. They don't necessarily have a retirement savings account. The land that they own is their retirement or what they can pass down to the next generation. And so compensating them for that land, even if it's not at the full value that you would get from, a developer, is important, it seems like.
Absolutely. And again, I'm proud of the fact that since it's in our inception, AFT has been at the forefront of leading the charge and the advocacy efforts for purchase programs, whether it's purchase of agricultural conservation easement programs, PACE to use the acronym, or purchase of development rights programs that we know it by here in New York, where I'm based, PDR. These programs provide an important opportunity for farmers and farm families to get compensated. I mean, we hope eventually we'll have programs available across the country. I mean, we do now have federal funding, the ASET-AIL program, Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, and the Agricultural Land Easement Program do provide funding from the federal government in the Farm Bill for these programs. Again, it's a 50% match, but it really does help widen the availability of this tool for landowners, which again, as I've said, help create affordability, but also at the back end, as you mentioned, really creates a way for farmers to fund their retirement. You mentioned, and it's often noted that, land is a farmer's 401k. And so the purchase programs are so important because it provides compensation and a return on that equity so that the retiring farmer, the senior farmer, and his or her spouse are able to retire and turn the farm over at a more affordable cost to the next generation, which helps the viability of the farm as well. So it solves some other planning issues as well in the farmland protection and farmland transfer interface. But I can't say enough how important purchase programs have been, continue to be, and I know and I'm confident that AFT will continue to take the lead on getting more funding at the federal level, helping programs maintain their funding at the state and local level, and working with states and municipalities that don't have programs. It takes time to build up the level of support for these programs, but AFT's in it for the long haul. It's one of the things that I'm testament to, given my tenure at AFT. But I'm really, as I look to the next 40 years at AFT, I'm so confident that we've got the base for the future, and we'll continue to keep working on this issue.
So we're getting some good questions in from the audience, and I want to pose a couple of these to you. So we've got one coming in from Chris. You'll see it up on the screen right now. But how can we ensure the reduced value is taken advantage of by non-farming investors? And how do we make sure that this farmland is actually transferred to farmers?
So now we're getting into farmland protection 202. It's certainly possible, but the basic deed restriction, the conservation easement, generally speaking, does not dictate who can purchase the land or whether it needs to be a farmer and needs to be maintained in agricultural use from an affirmative perspective. They're essentially restrictions. That said, in the Northeast in particular, the states of Massachusetts and Vermont and now New York are really leading the way, creating some additional restrictions. They've got some very fancy names, an option to purchase at agricultural value, a preemptive purchase right. But basically, they control two things in addition to the subdivision and the non-agricultural use. And the rights that they control are really, one requires that the land be sold to a farmer, someone who earns his or her more than half of his or her income from the actual farming. And secondly, many will require that the land be conveyed at its true agricultural value, and often will require that it be actively farmed. Again, these additional restrictions are not for every landowner. Currently, they're really only prevalent in the 3 states that I've mentioned. But looking in answer to the question and looking to the future, these are going to be important additional tools that can be used to make sure that farmland stays in the hands of farmers and is farmed. And I think, again, I'm proud to note that AFT has always supported these efforts and continues to be at the forefront of expanding their use when it makes sense.
Thanks, Jerry. Chris, I hope that answers your question. So we've kind of talked about a lot of the nuts and bolts of, what these programs are, how do they work. Tell us a little bit about land that we've actually been able to protect, by using these programs.
Sure. I mean, I often, there are two landowners that I tend to work with and have worked with over the years. I mean, there are the landowners who have a successor in place and are struggling with transferring that land to the next generation, creating a retirement, in many cases when they haven't saved a separate retirement account. And so trying to do both at the same time, and in many cases trying to satisfy other children in the family, with a legacy, can be a very daunting challenge. And one of the things that, the conservation easement can do is to help these families create win-win scenarios so that the senior generation can retire and have some income to live on. The junior generation, those that choose to farm, get a more affordable entry ticket into farming, and quite often the non-farming heirs are get some level of compensation if the development rights are sold due to the sale of the development rights, and so their legacy expectations are satisfied somewhat. I mean, it's a big challenge because I've also known many families that simply have not been able to sort of figure this out and divide the land up equally among farming and non-farming siblings. And that is a true challenge in the estate planning context. The other landowner that I work with are those that don't have any successor in place. They may not have children. They may not have children who are interested in farming. They may not even be farming. You know, I work with a number of landowners who have inherited family land and are thinking about the future and really want to be assured that it will be kept in agriculture. And one landowner who I worked with several years ago, she had a family property located in Kentucky, a very, very lovely woman. Her name was Jenny McComas, and she really wanted her land to stay in farming. And she was able to work with AFT. We were able to work with her. And she decided that she would donate her land to AFT, knowing that because of our mission and our commitment, that when at some point in the future we reconvey that property, we will permanently protect it. And, you know, on a bittersweet note, Jenny passed away last year, but she did so knowing that AFT is going to take care of this land and make sure that the family land's legacy is protected. We expect and hope to sell it to the farmers who are currently farming it. But those are a couple of examples. There's lots of variations in between. And in terms of a sort of exhortation to folks who are thinking about farm transfer, the one thing I would say is that folks really need to sort of take a first step. Sometimes, you know, it can be challenging to get started, but I've, over the years, have seen a lot of folks who once they do, and if they stick with it, it really makes a huge difference. You know, planning is a process that takes time. It should. This is, you know, whether you're protecting your land or transferring it, that's one of the biggest decisions, if not the most important decision that these landowners are going to make. So we really encourage them to start early, think it through, and take their time, but to stay with it.
And I mean, really, really right on target there. We've actually gotten a few comments from Jenny on YouTube, who's been talking about, you know, she's got 170 acres in Oklahoma and her kids aren't interested in farming it. So Jenny, I think some of the other viewers have given you some advice on who you can reach out to, but I think if you want to take another step, get in touch with Jerry. You know, we'll scroll his contact information on the bottom of the screen right now. It's just jcosgrove@farmland.org. But I know that he would love to talk to you and help you figure out what your options are. We have another couple of good questions, Jerry, that I want to get to. So here's one that you'll see on the screen now. Hold on. There we go. Are you seeing increased pressure for rural land development in the U.S., especially in the past year? And could conservation subdivision design be a compromise solution?
So to the first question, we actually, even before this year, our Farms Under Threat study shows that sort of large lot development has increased substantially over the last 20 years, which is a sort of insidious but very significant concern. And anecdotally, in fact, I was on the phone earlier today with an attorney in Maine, and he said that the real estate transaction levels are at heights that he's never seen. So I think the short answer to that first question is yes. In terms of conservation subdivision divide, potentially. I mean, it's well done. Conservation subdivision design would really be a way to sort of develop the land in a win-win scenario where you develop it in such a way that the housing doesn't interfere with potential future agricultural uses. It's certainly possible. I would observe that it's easier said than done in some cases, because not all new landowners, even if they're in a rural area, really fully appreciate, you know, some of the potential side effects of agriculture. You know, agriculture is a significant, you know, commercial use bordering on industrial, depending on the scale. Means there's going to be noise and dust. Farmers work all hours. If it's a livestock operation, there will be manure. There will be odor. You know, there will be big equipment. So, you know, those are some of the side effects. They can be managed, but, you know, they need to be sort of very carefully thought through.
And that's why we have right to farm laws in places like New York, right?
Yeah. But again, I would say that right to farm laws are helpful. But I think an ongoing education and outreach process. Many farmers now reach out to their neighbors, have newsletters, and we certainly support and encourage those farmers to, make sure their neighbors understand, like, this is what agriculture looks like. This is what happens. And so it's important to really be thoughtful and mindful about relationships with neighbors, and being a good neighbor, is a two-way street.
Absolutely. So Jerry, I want to shift and talk a little bit about Farm Legacy and that program that you manage at AFT right now, which really focuses on you working with landowners to help them understand the options that they have to protect their land. So tell us a little bit about that program, kind of the achievements that you've been able to achieve so far and where it's heading in the future.
Yeah, well, thanks, Greg. I mean, one of the great joys of sort of in my career is that I've been able to do field work and outreach work as a regional director, but now I've been really fortunate enough to return to AFT and work on the Farm Legacy program one-on-one with landowners, many of whom are members and longtime supporters, many of whom find us on the internet or, as a result of outreach, in sessions like this. And really for me, what I ask folks is to really think through, like, what is it they want to see happen to their farm? And I can guarantee you, I have yet to have a landowner say, one, I don't care, or two, I don't care if it's developed.
Right.
The landowners, they care about their land. It may not be the most valuable asset in some cases, but it's almost always the most important. And so, I take great satisfaction in working through with landowners. And in some cases, one of the options for landowners, particularly those who are older or may not have any heirs or successors in place, is to consider some kind of gift to AFT of their land. Again, the Farm Legacy program is unique in that we make a commitment to protect land that we receive as a gift. Fits our mission. It's why the program was designed the way it is. And is very important to us and really to the landowners we work with. And, there's a fair bit of creativity. Some folks like Jenny was in a situation where she made an outright gift. It made sense for her at the time. She wanted to resolve the issue and was able to do that. Other landowners that I've worked with want to keep using and living on their property, on their farm or ranch. And we, again, are able to accommodate that with the type of gift known as a retained life estate or life's use. The landowner conveys the property to AFT, but retains full life use for as long as they're alive or as long as they want it. And that's an option that many landowners find attractive because it's relatively simple, doesn't change the situation, but it gives them the peace of mind today that the land is going to be taken care of when they pass on. And then increasingly now, we are working with landowners where we're able to provide some level of compensation for our purchase of the land, what's known as a bargain sale. It enables us to fulfill our promise to them that once we resell the land down the road, we will permanently protect it, make sure that it's no longer available for development or fragmentation. And the landowner gets some compensation. And again, we can structure that creatively. We've got some landowners who are interested in installment payments, or some type of annuity payment. We're able to do that. And again, that's not for all landowners or all situations, but it does provide an option that I think will be of interest. So it's a nice range. We certainly try to be creative and work with folks and obviously any local partners that may be available to assist us as well. So I'm pleased to be able to do what I do and look. I really enjoy chatting with or emailing with landowners or their advisors to help brainstorm about how to figure this out. There's no roadmap or cookie cutter recipe, but keeping the land in mind and the landowner's needs and interests. That's what we try to do.
So we've got a couple good questions I want to get to before the end. Just to remind people, please keep asking them in the comments thread. If we don't get to them on the call today, we'll do our best to answer them in text after. So here's one from Brian I want to put up on the screen for you, Jerry. Can you talk a little bit about established programs and how farmland protection has helped create a long-term business environment for agriculture?
Yeah, great question, Brian. I think, there's no doubt that states that have long-standing programs, especially in the Northeast, but in some of the coasts as well, it creates a tool that one can both protect a solid block of farmland in a region or in a certain area of the state, but two, it also creates an expectation among farmers and their advisors that there is this tool available to both protect the land but also help solidify the business. Again, as I mentioned before, conservation easement proceeds can be used to reinvest in the business, facilitate a transfer, in some cases where needed, reduce debt, really help the bottom line viability. I've seen a number of cases where farmers are now in the transfer situation. If they sell easements, they will use those proceeds to diversify the business and often create a pathway for the next generation to get involved. Again, creating a new enterprise, farm right near us. They sell direct market, they sell wholesale, they sell are in a partnership with a cider making company. They have a farm market. They have all these various enterprises, some of which have been funded, from sort of sale of assets, including, potential sale of development rights. So there's, that expectation and sort of continuity is very important because it allows me, putting on my farm transfer planning hat, tool that you can go to landowners and say, here's a way to create a win-win scenario and help you move forward.
Well, it makes rural communities and farm communities a destination, right? If you have a bunch of protected farmland, you've got cool things. You've got pick your own, you've got breweries, you've got corn mazes, you've got wine tasting. And I feel like when you have these programs that are working in a distinct area and you're protecting kind of a non-fragmented piece of land, all around, it really does create business opportunities for everyone in that area.
Yeah, there's a wide range. I mean, there's the notion of critical mass where the best neighbor to a farmer is another farmer, and that works really well. But what we're seeing now in the Northeast in particular is also the notion of community important farms. When I started many years ago, there was kind of a reluctance to save the last farm in a community. And now we recognize that there's an importance and a significant value to doing that, both to the agricultural operation, which couldn't survive otherwise, but also to the community that then has a resource that they can rally around. They can get fresh produce from, they can go pick pumpkins, they can take their children to learn a little bit about agriculture, where their food comes from, and not necessarily have to drive 20 or 30 miles or more out into the agricultural area. So I think there's a broad range of opportunities. And I think, again, as things have evolved over my career, I think more of us, certainly here at AFT, we recognize that there's a value to all, sort of all forms and shapes and sizes of farmland protection and the benefits that it has not only to agriculture, but to the community and our non-farm neighbors.
We got a lot of good questions coming in still, so I want to put one more to you. I think it'll be a very on-target question for this conversation. Jerry, can you briefly discuss how farmers might work with land trust to achieve access to land, and maybe talk a little bit about something we've increasingly promoted at AFT in the last few years, and that's a buy, protect, sell.
Yeah, one of the things that we at AFT are very proud of is that in 1980, when we were founded, there were no agricultural land trusts, or no land trusts that really focused significantly on agricultural land. That's sort of one of the reasons why AFT was formed. But over the last 40 years, we have worked with land trusts who have been formed specifically to protect agricultural land, like the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust, Maine Farmland Trust, Connecticut Farmland Trust. And so that's been very gratifying. So they're often excellent partners. But many other land trusts here in the Hudson Valley, Scenic Hudson is a group that started out really as an environmental advocacy organization, and in the 90s realized that protecting farmland would be an important component of their mission as they broadened it. And so there are a number of land trusts across New York State, the Northeast, across the country that don't necessarily focus only on agricultural land, but do protect agricultural land. And these are great resources for landowners. If you have one and you're in their service area, you should definitely contact them. They're very helpful. We work with them all the time. They're very important partners. In terms of buy, protect, sell, I mean, that's a great option. The biggest challenge, not surprisingly, is finding the acquisition money. And again, at AFT, we are thinking constantly about creative ways to find funding that we can put to use, either AFT specifically or in partnership with other land trusts, to essentially take threatened land off the market, and then it buys you time, literally, to work on a creative farmland protection scenario, because often those take time. Most of these types of projects take several years. And in a hot real estate market or a distressed sale, the sale is going to happen, in a matter of weeks or months, not years. And so being able to move quickly is something that we've long recognized is critical.
Absolutely.
We wish we had, and we're working on it to get more access to more resources so that we can all move quickly, and we can work with partners to move quickly, but very potential impactful tool, because again, it will allow AFT and or working with local land trusts to move quickly. And often that's what really needs to happen.
So we're going to wrap up in another 5-10 minutes, but we have a lot of great questions still coming in. If you have any, like I said, please feel free to ask them in the comment thread of whatever platform you're viewing on, and we'll do our best to get to them. We got one more I want to put to you, Jerry. So this is from Deborah, and I think it's asking about how do you link farmland protection programs with the goal of creating a more sustainable food system?
Well, thanks for the question, Deb. I think the first thing to say is that there's not a sustainable food system without farmland. So to me, and this has always been sort of the AFT approach and mantra, is you really have to have the land base to have to even begin the discussion about what a sustainable food system looks like. That said, AFT with its holistic mission, and again, it's one of the things that drew me to the organization, is that it approaches it broadly. So then you're looking at the farming practices and promoting and incentivizing, sustainable regenerative agriculture. Again, AFT has made great strides in the last, 10 or 15 years on working more on, sustainable ag practices, regenerative agriculture, now climate smart agriculture. And lastly, really continuing to recognize that we need to support the people, the land access, the farm transfer, the farm viability. These are all important pieces, and without all of them, agriculture won't be sustainable. And so, that's what makes it challenging, because you've really got to weave these together and make sure they work in sync over time.
And this is just a really good comment from Brian I want to share, but I like this idea of farmland as the factory floor for a sustainable food system. And I think it shows that you can't build something, right? You can't build a sustainable food system without having that land available. So I just think that's a great thought. So I wanted just to share with the audience.
Well said. Yeah.
Jerry, we've still got a little bit of time. Is there anything you want to wrap up? Any final words? Any inspirational quotes you want to share? Anything on your mind?
One of the things that I really enjoy about my work now, and I've always felt is very important, is this is farmland protection in many cases, and especially farm transfer, is landowner driven. So for folks who are very independent, and strongly value and cherish their property rights, this is one of the most important property rights that they have. And I remind folks that it's in their control. What happens to their land? Who gets it? Does it get protected or not? And I think, it's always been really at the base of what AFT has been about. The downside is that if the individual landowner doesn't take action, no one's going to tell them to. No one's going to make them do that. And so for me, in working with folks, motivating the individuals or finding ways to motivate folks to take action, move forward, to protect their land, to transfer their land, to begin a planning process. That's really critical. I've, sort of realized that the technical details take care of themselves once there's a commitment from the landowner to move forward and to stay with it. And so, I realized early on in doing, farm transfer workshops that it was as much a motivational exercise as anything. One of my favorite remembrances in my early days when I was doing farm transfer workshops as well as working as a regional director was I had wrote several editions of a estate planning book with Julia Friedgood called Your Land is Your Legacy.
Mhm.
We've got a copy of a brochure that's a condensed version of it on our website. But at some of the sessions, I realized I started recognizing some farmers who had come to multiple sessions. And so for a couple of them, I would pull them aside afterward and say, I really appreciate the fact that you're coming back for another dose of the Cherry Cosgrove show. And I said, well, what I'd really like you to do is to go home and do something. Because, I can't do this for you, and you need to contact somebody, you need to work with an advisor. I'm not sure they ever did, but it was a reminder that, sort of taking that next step is always very critical, whether it's farmland protection, farm transfer, or even, some level of community action to try to protect that farm next to you that's important in your community.
And that's one of the main reasons why I really wanted to have this conversation today, is to kind of get people to understand that there are options. I know it can seem incredibly daunting when you're thinking about, this land that means a lot to you personally, and how to keep that land in agriculture and how to protect it and who you can work with. But, we've got Jerry, we've got our expert staff at the Farmland Information Center. Please reach out to us. We would love to talk to you and discuss your options. I think we have time for one more question, Jerry, and then we're going to wrap up. That's from Carly. Do you have suggestions for how local governments can support land trusts to allow for more farmland protection efforts?
And that's a great question, Carly. I think, first, give meaning to the phrase farm friendly. So hopefully local governments can create an advisory board, ask farmers what they think. Ask farmers, how something might impact them before you enact a local ordinance. Ask farmers how they can help. In communities where there are significant resources, a tax base, or, perhaps a wealthier second home community, think about providing incentives, compensation to fund purchase of conservation easement programs locally, even if it's just as a match to federal or state funding. Again, recognizing that those land rights are the farmer's retirement account. And so really approaching it with a strict zoning approach in many cases can be counterproductive. Thinking about what are the incentives, what are the specific things that the local government can and could do to support farming.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap up here. I think it's been a great conversation. I appreciate so much, Sherry, you joining us. I want to tell people about the next live free range conversation that we have on tap. It's going to be on January 21st with Tim Fink and Emily Liss. We're going to talk about what the transition to a new administration means for federal farm policy. So I encourage everyone to tune in for that. We'll obviously get information out to everyone so you know where to go. And I just thank everyone for tuning in, everyone that's watching live and everyone that's gonna watch this afterwards. We really appreciate it. So until next time, I'm your host, Greg Plott.